Welcome again, everyone. We are so grateful that you've taken the chance to join us today for this Q&A session with LNHR Consulting. We're excited to have them back. They've done some great trainings for us here of late, and each of them have been fantastic. And so I know we're in for another treat today. The format of this will kind of work as follows. We're going to have Laura do a brief introduction of her team. And once that is done, I will then go through a number of questions that we've received. We have around 14-ish questions that have been pre-asked, and we're going to go through those one at a time. Laura, do you want to go ahead and introduce you and your team?
Sounds wonderful. Thank you so much, Dan. We really appreciate this opportunity. If you've attended any of the trainings before, you know that we're pretty passionate about human resources and we love helping businesses. We have gone through the questions. We want you to know that you're not alone. These are questions that we get all the time from clients of all different shapes and sizes all over the country. So you're not alone. These are wonderful questions. We're so excited to be here today to be able to answer these for you as well. So I'm Laura Newbrough. I'm the owner of LNHR Consulting. We're a human resources department, as I like to call it, for small businesses, medium businesses, even some large businesses. We're local in Mesa, and we support just a variety of industries, anywhere from engineering, construction, to private schools, to private security and intelligence, a vet's office, pretty much anything across the board. Diane Neiman is our HR director here. Diane and I have worked together now for several years. She is my right-hand person and just amazing wealth of knowledge and very compassionate and very, very knowledgeable in everything HR. And then Maren should be joining us. She's having some technical issues with Zoom. Of course, computers don't like it when you switch. Maren is actually internationally certified in HR. She got her certification in London. She's been in HR for about 10 years. Prior to that, she was a high school teacher, which was, that can definitely translate over to HR as well. So thank you again for having us today, and we look forward to getting these questions answered.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Well, let's go ahead and get started. We'll just jump right into these questions. Question number one, Laura, how do you deal with long-term sickness, and what are the laws involved? And when can we legally let someone go? How'd you answer that?
This is a great question. So we recommend always following the ADA interactive process. Anything medical related, anything for a leave request, anytime somebody needs an accommodation, we recommend that we just go straight to that website. We grab that paperwork and we use that paperwork to follow the process. Whether you're 3 employees or 1 million employees, it doesn't matter. That protects the company, it protects the employee. And it ensures that we're following the same process every single time to make sure that we're not discriminating against anybody, even accidentally. This process it's interactive. So it starts with paperwork. It goes to the employee. The employee then takes it to their doctor. It has a cover letter. It explains to the doctor what information is needed. And that way the doctor is filling out what the employee can and cannot do, if they can return to work, when they can return to work. And it's not up to us because we're not doctors. We don't want to make decisions that could put an employee in jeopardy or, once again, can lead us to legal trouble because we've accidentally discriminated against somebody. As far as termination, if the employer just simply terminates the employment because the employee is not on like an approved leave, or if you don't have policy in place or the policy shows that no leave is available, if we just simply go that route and terminate the employee, then we've not engaged in that interactive process. And we have therefore violated the employee's rights under the ADA. So we don't want to just terminate somebody because they can't come back. We need to make sure that we've received all this paperwork before we can move forward with decisions. We, as the employer, we should be prepared to evaluate each employee's case, like case by case basis. We need to make sure that we're looking at every situation, and we need to make sure that we can defend with evidence any undue hardship that the employer may come across due to the employee being on leave. That's where we recommend working with an attorney, because we as HR, we can't determine if your business has an undue hardship because we can't see the finances. We can't see everything under the sun. So that's where we recommend an attorney steps in, and the attorney can help guide you to ensure that if a last resort, if we do have to terminate the employee, that there is evidence of undue hardship. Each case should be, again, treated individually, because what might be unreasonable in one situation may be completely reasonable in another. So again, termination should always be the last resort after just checking with an attorney to ensure that you do have undue hardship under the law. But as long as we follow that paperwork trail and we've engaged in the interactive process, we've done everything on our end to protect the company and the employee.
Okay, thank you. I know that's a tough issue.
That's a lot.
Yeah, we've seen that issue multiple times on our end. Obviously, we deal, it's for different reasons, but thank you. We just had a question come in. If I can interject one for you.
Yes,
what
please.
are your thoughts on recreational marijuana and drug testing in the workplace from an HR perspective?
That is a question that comes up all the time. With the laws changing so much, it's important that if we're going to put a policy in place, that we need to look at the business as a whole. Some employers don't mind that recreational use because their employees are not put in any sort of safety sensitive positions. Anytime an employer has safety sensitive positions, drivers, anything, it's somebody on a roof, somebody out in the field, somebody who's going to go into people's homes, like pest control, something along those lines. It's our recommendation that it's zero tolerance. But we do have clients and their employees are, behind a computer, they're more kind of gamers. And they have said to me, well, if we put that policy in place, we won't have any employees. So again, it's about putting the right policies in place and making sure that we're doing the same thing for every single employee at every step of the process. So we don't want to discriminate. We don't want to say, oh, we're going to send this person for a random drug screening and not have a random policy in place or a way to actually generate random drug screenings. We just want to make sure that that policy is in place, it's been communicated, and the policy makes sense for the business.
So there's not really any type of industry standard. It's just whatever works for the business. Put it in writing, make sure it's in your manuals, make sure it's communicated. If there's any updates, make sure those updates go out, then enforce it across the board.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Very good. Okay. Next question. For small to mid-sized businesses that can't hire an HR department, what are the advantages to using HR software such as Keep, Monday, or Bamboo HR versus using a company such as yourself as a contract HR department?
Well, we recommend using as much technology as possible to manage the administrative portion of of employment, such as the employee files, the onboarding documentation, reviews, etc. This can help to ensure compliance and consistency, data security. And we also help create those processes and implement those types of software. From a people perspective, we can partner with your company to act as your HR representative. We provide customized support and guidance for situations. We provide training and role playing, and we also ensure compliance, and we get to know your team. And by using our services, you're freeing up your time, getting appropriate experience and expertise, which will allow you to scale up as much as possible. So it takes that HR piece off of your shoulders and it puts it on ours where we love to have it.
So Diane, maybe let me ask you a little follow-up question to that. There's a lot of softwares that exist out there to deal with different HR needs for businesses of different sizes. Mm-hmm. I feel that those softwares fill kind of a niche role in performing certain tasks really well, but not other tasks. And
Yes, I would have to say we would agree with that. There's some softwares that might be better at the recruiting piece, but not so much the HRIS piece or even the payroll piece. Another software might be better at for the payroll. So you really have to just do your due diligence and research to find out which software is best for your needs.
All right. Looks like we got. Okay. A third question here. We have employees who are dating and they are not in a direct report situation, but it is made for some awkward moments for other employees. From an HR perspective, can we do anything about this or do we just let it go?
Maren, would you like to take that one?
Sure. So obviously, we want our employees to all get along and we encourage them building relationships. But when that relationship becomes something more like romantic, there are a couple things that we want to really be careful about. If they are not directly reporting to each other, which is like the big number one thing you never want to have happen, you still can put in place and have conversations about how they need to make sure that they're behaving while in the workplace. What goes on outside of the workplace should not be coming inside. If they are causing, drama and that kind of stuff, then I think that's conversations to be had, and that's a conduct issue at that point. But I think setting those expectations for everybody is a really good place to start there. And then you just want to ensure that it never does happen that that person is going to be directly reporting to a person that they're in a relationship with. And honestly, that could be, any kind of relationship. It doesn't have to be romantic. But that is also just a conversation to have with them as they let you know that they're in a relationship. Like, hey, that's fine. We're happy for you, but you need to make sure that you maintain a professional business relationship while at work. So making sure that there are those boundaries there, and then just being able setting them up, you can then hold them accountable.
We actually just updated a handbook that included romantic relationships. And again, the policy, we don't want to prevent the development of friendships or relationships, but we need to set the boundaries in a policy. And if you have a handbook and you haven't done a review in a while, no time like today, because we're getting close to the new year. So that's always a great excuse to say, hey, it's a new year. We did a revamp of the employee handbook. So nobody feels that it's been done because of them. But we do recommend having some guidelines in your employee handbook that just sets the expectations and the boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Excellent advice. Thank you. While you were speaking, we had a comment come in on the chat from one of our attendees regarding the first question about employee sickness.
Yep, the undue hardship.
Yes. Let me go ahead and read it so that everyone can hear it. And then if you want to give a response to it, that would be great.
Okay, perfect.
The question is, what is legally an undue hardship? We work in a school and employees are always sick, so we do not have enough adults to meet our 1-to-4 ratio. However, our employees will use up their paid sick time or come with a doctor's note. Does a doctor's note always cover their absence, or would we be allowed to go through our process of coaching, write them up, and then termination? Or are we putting ourselves in a bad position? I know being sick is hard and something we don't want to force people to come in to spread the sickness, but it's also causing others to become exhausted and then they become absent.
Yes, and I see a couple different issues here. What it sounds like to me is there's probably some recurring issues with people calling in sick. So again, we go back to the policy. We need to set the expectations because you are a school and you do need to have people in person and on site, and you do have to work within these ratios. I think it's important that we look at the policy and ensure that the policy is written so, however many days that they're out, they can get a doctor's note or whatever those boundaries may be. But as far as a legally undue hardship, again, that's where we turn to the attorneys because they know the law we help set the guidelines and the process and the procedure, but they know the law. They're the ones who can look at your business as a whole and say, yes, this is causing an undue hardship for your business, or this is kind of a tricky one. As far as the folks calling in sick, in my experience, I've not seen that turn into an undue hardship. I think that if it's a recurring issue and folks are calling in at the last minute, again, let's set that policy and set the expectations as to when they should be calling in if they're not going to be available for the day. And then that way we can hold them accountable to those policies should they break those rules and call in at the last minute. Yes, we don't want them coming in and spreading sickness. And it does put a lot of pressure on the other employees who are there all the time. So I think at this point, if we have a recurring issue, that's something that we would all work together to determine whether or not we can move forward with a progressive discipline, because that does turn into an issue when it's an attendance problem.
So just hearing you trying to summarize, it sounds like they need to just take a look at their policies and make sure the policies are protecting the business.
Yes.
Employees. Then consulting an attorney if they feel that there is undue hardship that is occurring. Yes,
because the attorney is going to be able to look at your business as a whole and really help determine financially, operationally, all those things, whether or not that's something that's going to fall within the limits of the law.
Okay, very good. All right, next question, completely different topic here.
Okay.
How can or should HR get involved when a C-level member of management is creating a hostile work environment for other employees? They're not doing anything unethical or wrong, but treating one department differently than the rest and making it hard for a small group to do their jobs. It seems to be an awkward place for HR to step in. Should they?
So I actually would have a couple questions just to better understand kind of what's going on. And one of those questions is the C-level person aware of the situation? Has anybody brought this to their attention? Has it been previously addressed? And then I would want to know a little bit more about the reporting structure. And the reason why I would want to know a little bit about the reporting structure is sometimes companies, when they're growing, they have an org chart in place that worked when they were, 15 people. You get to 25 people and that org structure really doesn't make sense anymore. And by addressing the organizational structure and the reporting structure and saying, hey, maybe all these employees shouldn't be reporting to the C-level person. Maybe it's time to put a manager in there and kind of take that tactical, just that tactical method of managing off of that person's plate. It may help resolve that, because it sounds to me like the C-level person's not going anywhere. But the C-level person might be really good at what they do, but they're not a good manager. And I think that this is a symptom of that. So maybe it's time to review the org structure. That would be maybe one option. Then I would like to know also what the challenge is as far as getting the work done. If we have two different groups, is it because one is, the software group and the other one's sales? Or are they two completely different entities essentially that maybe shouldn't be reporting up to the same person as well? My other question is it because expectations are always changing, right? I've seen that happen plenty of times where the expectations, the goalpost keeps moving, and what are we doing? We don't know. So as far as HR stepping in, yes, absolutely. HR can definitely assist in the situation. We can do this in a variety of ways. I always recommend anytime that there seems to be a disconnect and people are feeling that they can't get their work done, I always recommend a one-to-one meeting. Maybe that's a group meeting. Maybe that's a manager with employee one-to-one meetings. But those meetings should take place on a weekly basis, especially in a situation like this where we are having some troubles. The meeting should have an agenda. It should talk about what are the challenges, what are the goals, what do we need to do, and then set the expectations from a communication standpoint. So that agenda should be recurring. I always recommend keeping some sort of okay, let's pull up the next agenda and add it and add it and add it. So you can kind of go back and look at your notes and see if things are working. It's a way to measure. But those meetings should take place on a weekly basis until we kind of get into a better groove. Because if we have if we have a small group of employees and it's not just one that just can't get their work done, then something's wrong. And we need to draw this out into the open. And this might be a way to present this to the C-level person without putting them on the defense. Employee feedback forms, maybe if you haven't done any sort of employee surveys along those lines, maybe a survey might be a way to at least gather the information to help present that issue to the C-level person, because maybe the C-level person were afraid to take it to the person because they might be upset with the information. But maybe if we do an employee survey and make sure that we're kind of cover all our bases there, we can get that feedback that we can share with that C-level person that won't feel like an attack. And then just going back to, are the job descriptions dialed in? Are we certain that everybody understands what's supposed to be happening on a day-to-day basis? These are all just little things that HR can do. And I would love to know more about the situation so we can kind of dive in, because I know that there's probably some personality stuff in here that's going to need to be worked with. But these are just kind of the high-level, simple ways that HR can step in without having to go diving face first into, the, hey, C-level person, people have a problem with you. That doesn't always go over well.
No, I can imagine too, if that C-level person is the CEO, that's going to be maybe a much different battle than it would be another position.
Yes.
You could go to the CEO or the president or whoever and say, here's some of our challenges, let's discuss those.
Yes, absolutely. And being able, I feel like the more information that you can collect and keep it as objective as possible, come prepared with real information, things you have collected from the employees, feedback, things like this. So it's not perceived as you coming to the person with what you think is going on.
Okay, very good. Very, very good. Okay, another question here. Management does not prioritize HR highly, but recognizes that it is a necessity. I don't have many resources. If I'm a one-person HR department in a construction company with 50 to 75 employees, what should I be focused on most? And what would your recommendations be for me?
Diane, would you like to take that one? I think we've all been there.
Yes. I'm smiling at that one because yes we have been. Each one of us has been there. But as a one-person HR department, you really need to focus first on relationships with the leadership, the management team, because they have to be on board with you, not only as a necessity, but because they want to be, because they see the value of what you add and what HR adds to the organization. We recommend maybe a bi-weekly meeting with leadership to just go around the room and talk about any challenges, et cetera. That may need to be a weekly meeting in the beginning, but it could certainly then, move to a bi-weekly or even less frequent once you get to that sweet spot. But, prepare a communication process and then set expectations with the team as to when they need to loop HR in. You've probably seen in your experience where they waited until it was too late, really, to add HR in, and then you're scrambling to make it right. So if you help them understand when they need to loop HR in, it will make it easier and smoother for both you, them, and the other employee if there's someone else involved. And we have also found that setting up an HR at your company email address has worked very well, because then questions or comments or concerns can be just filtered into that email, and then it can be handled directly by you as the HR person. Then also, after leadership gets involved, we would recommend doing some trainings with manager at the manager level to make sure that they also understand the importance of HR and what you can do to help them take things off their plate or just make it easier for them to do their job. Another area that you'll want to focus in on is compliance, whether that's safety, policies, processes. That's also very important to make sure like your I-9 process is in place and up to date, that all of your policies that you have, those are up to date. A handbook goes hand in hand with all of these in this particular category. And then cost control with, return of investments, whether it's automation, retention, turnover rates, and benefits. Those are all things. Now that from a one person HR department hearing this today, you're probably thinking, oh my God, I can't do all this. Yes, you can. And if need be, we're here to help you. So just let us know.
So, from a Librarian Carroll perspective, we see this on a very regular basis, that it's often like that long-term office manager that has a lot of trust, who wears so many hats, gets the HR hat. Right? And there's
all the time
so much that they can do.
Right.
So, and their level of education on all these topics is only so high as well.
Yes.
Where would you recommend that someone in that position could go to get more basic, broad HR training on some of these topics you just mentioned?
I'd say call us.
Yes, that's what I was going to say.
Yes, we do that quite a bit.
Yeah.
We work one-on-one with folks from like a mentoring standpoint. We come in, we've done half-day trainings with management and leadership teams with an HR representative in the room within their organization. This is how you follow process and procedure. This is progressive discipline. This is reasonable suspicion. This is when you call the HR person, not 10 days from now when the person's already been terminated. We've seen that before. Like, this person was terminated 2 weeks ago. The worst is when we find out because we've gotten a letter from an attorney.
Right.
We don't want that to happen, but we can help in all areas of HR. We work quite a bit with in-house human resources just to help on the back end. Let's do some training. Let's help you with this compliance. Let's help automate some processes for you on the back end. But I think Diane really hit the nail on the head there with, it's about being engaged with the leadership team, the people who are overseeing those employees, to help get through the day. With 75 employees, that's a lot, and you can't be the referee for them all.
No.
Okay. All right, very good. So this next question maybe kind of is a stepping stone from the last. If you're that one person HR department, when should you step in and act as a referee when there are staff issues versus having direct managers or supervisors handle those personal disputes and issues?
This is one we get quite a bit. This comes up a lot. So what we typically do first is we say, okay, let's talk about what's happening with these issues. Questions that I would ask are, how would you rate the manager's skill sets and competencies for dealing with these types of issues? Have they been through training? Is this recurring? Is it one manager that's constantly sending all their little problems over to you and the other managers aren't? And then really, what are the issues? Are they really sensitive in nature, or is this just a little teeny tiny thing that two people can't get along? And then the other thing that I would want to know is it the management that's coming to you and asking for your help with these disputes, or is it employees who are just bypassing their managers and going straight to HR every single time there's an issue? Because there's things that we can do on both ends as far as that's concerned. And that would be training the manager, putting that communication process into place, and then training the employees as well. And it is tough, but we've all three of us being a one-person HR department at some point. Sometimes when you have this process in place, you have to send them back. Like, you got to go back to your manager and let the manager know, hey, this is what's going on. I have to send this back. I mean, we've trained you in how to deal with this. There's a progressive discipline policy, or whatever that looks like. So that way you're really spending your time as a one-person HR department doing things that are actually of value. If there's one manager that just seems to have problems with all their employees, that sounds to me like that's probably an issue with the management style of that person. So we would address that issue differently. we always recommend training for managers, remaining objective, the progressive discipline, which is coaching conversations, verbal warnings, written warnings, final warnings, and what is appropriate for what scenario. There are cases where you're going to bypass the entire process and go straight to a final written warning because somebody's violated a safety policy that could have gotten somebody hurt. We also recommend the training for difficult conversations. We also recommend reasonable suspicion. That is a big one, as we kind of discussed a little bit earlier too. And then we have a training for managers that goes through scenario, and it's all about when to call HR. And these are real life scenarios and the outcomes of these scenarios because people did not get HR involved. If we don't know about it, we can't help the process. And again, it's not good when we're the last ones to know, when we could have prevented something and followed the proper process and procedure. Again, we don't want anybody to be discriminated against or have a case against us claiming that they've been discriminated against, and we have no documentation on our side showing that we didn't. Anything sensitive or severe, like sexual harassment, discrimination, anything along those lines, that should always be handled by HR. That follows like an investigation process that we want to make sure that we're handling with every situation that comes up like that. And then my advice to everyone always is document everything. If you didn't document it in our land, it didn't happen. And it's unfortunate that situations do come up, and people come to us a lot of times saying, hey, we had this situation come up and this is what happened. And then of course we didn't have any documentation. And that's never a fun situation to be in, because it's next to impossible to recreate documentation. And then it's not date stamped. It's not time stamped. It's probably not accurate. And we didn't follow the right process. So we're exposing ourselves to more risk that way. But in summary, I would say, let's look at the competencies of the managers. Do the managers need training? Do we have that communication policy or procedure in place? And then what are some of those areas that we can clean up from a process procedure standpoint, and then see if the behavior continues, to know whether or not we need to move forward with that manager on a progressive discipline or a coaching, some sort of a coaching or performance improvement.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Next question, we'll just keep on moving through these here. What is the best way to get basic help on employee handbooks, contracts, policies, procedures, etc.? Do we have to hire an attorney, or are there other lower cost alternatives to these documents?
We get that question quite a bit as well. We do actually handbook updates, policies, procedures, everything under the sun for a lot of our clients. In certain situations, we do recommend at the end, when everything's all baked up perfectly, then to take that to an attorney for one last set of eyes. And that helps from a cost standpoint, because the attorneys aren't putting the handbooks together. They're just looking it over for some basic points or tips, anything that might have changed in the law in the last 3 weeks since we started the handbook to now, because that does happen. But that would be our recommendation. And that helps companies save money, because a company of 30 people, you don't need to go spend $15,000 on a handbook through an attorney. Let's put all the basics in place for you. We can have an attorney spend 15 minutes and take one last look at it.
Yeah, I know here at the Baron Carroll, that's what we've done. As we've written different policies, we'll just send it to our attorney. And you're very right. Rather than spend hours and hours, he'll just give us 3 or 4 little bullet points, change this, and you're good to go.
Done. It's interesting too, the way that attorneys sometimes reword things, and we'll look at it and say, this says the same thing, but to the attorneys, they're like, well, no, written this way. I'm like, oh, okay, well, I believe you.
Yep. Attorney speak is different than regular.
It definitely is.
Okay, so next question, we'll shift gears a little bit here. I know this next question is one that our safety people have dealt with quite a bit. But question is, when we have an injured employee on light duty and they're on our return to work program, who should ideally communicate with doctors and the employee to make sure they're on track and feeling well treated? Is that my job as HR, or should that fall to our safety team?
This process is really a collaborative effort between the two. We would still recommend an HR rep handle anything that has to do with medical, whether it's doctor's reports or anything like that, just to make sure that that confidentiality is protected. And then also, we want to make sure to keep those files or any kind of correspondence completely separate from the employee files. And then whomever has access to that, that is very limited in what they can see and do. From our specific HR role, it would be to communicate with the employee, to coordinate the return to work, and then to document the entire process. The safety team, on the other hand, would handle any safety compliance issues, any communication that might be needed as far as physical requirements of the position and any required physical accommodations that may need to be made for that person to return to work. But along the way, we still would maintain the confidentiality of the medical files and the medical information. And then they would also be responsible for any workplace or worksite modifications that might be needed to accommodate any restrictions that that person may have coming back. So that's a two-teamer on that one, not just one or the other.
Two-teamer, I like that. Okay. Next question here. The owner of my company tends to only want to hire a particular kind of person. I've been told not to consider certain people because they'd be problematic for the type of work that we do or would make things awkward for other employees. How do I handle this situation and not be discriminatory?
That is another recurring question we do come across quite a bit. My first question, I always like to answer questions with a question. What are the concerns that the owner has? And have we had open dialogue with the owner regarding the concern? And again, like the one that we talked about earlier, I'm sure we're dealing with personalities. And, when you're the owner of the company, you are the owner of the company. However, from our perspective, our job in HR and your job in this role with this organization is to really understand what the company's legal obligations are and be able to communicate that with the team. It goes back to that training that we talked about. I would definitely recommend standardizing all the expectations, the processes, making sure that the job descriptions are clearly defined. We have the physical requirements in the job description. We really outline what is needed as far as the skill set that we're looking for. Let's make sure that the application process and the interview process are clean, that every single person is going through the same process. And that's where we would really want to leverage that software that we were talking about earlier. We love recruiting software. We love knockout questions. We love pre-screening, but making sure that we have a checklist. So before they're even coming in for an interview, we've done as much screening as possible, and we can help dial that in to make sure that we really are finding the right person for the right position. One other thing is to really focus on your company values. The vision, the mission, the values, make sure that that's part of the interviewing process. Make sure that the owner is, agreeing that these are our core values, and talk about how we hire to the core values, right? That's one way that we can incorporate that into the interviewing process. We can ask the candidates, what do you know about the company? Did you look through it? Give them homework, look through our website. Learn about our vision, mission, values. When you get on the phone with them, hey, what did you learn about our vision, mission, values? If they're like, I don't know, well, then maybe that's not the right person for the company. So really dialing in that cultural expectation, and hiring to that, making sure that everything is dialed in. I would also want to make sure that we've talked about the interviewing, the hiring process is the same, that 30-day check-in is the same. Anything performance management, we want to make sure all those processes are dialed in. We always recommend, we have an interview 101 training, which actually we've done with LeBaron and Carol in a setting like this before, and we'd be happy to do again. But we recommend our interview 101. It basically covers all the the laws that protect discrimination, anything under the EEOC. It talks about what not to ask and how to ask questions. And again, that goes all the way back to the job description. Can you perform these duties as listed on the job description? We talk about remaining objective. And then we also go through how to keep all that documented in a safe place, accessible to managers to make sure that everybody is on board. I would also, going back to kind of the vision, mission, and values, I would make sure that the policies do include the vision, mission, and values. And I would make sure that that everything is supporting an inclusive culture. And then for your protection, for you as a person, because in HR, if we do things and discriminate against somebody, we can be personally responsible for that. And that's a lot to take on. So to protect yourself, document everything. Document everything. And it's important to communicate with that owner how much value you can get from an inclusive culture. You get skill sets. As long as we're hiring the skill set that we need, think about all the different perspective you'll gain and different life experiences, just everything that can make your company better by expanding on the type of people that you're bringing on board. I mean, you'll have so much more to offer. And again, when you hire these people in, they'll make referrals. They'll bring other people to the team. Your recruiting costs will go down. Your turnover costs will go down. Your retention will build. You'll build a brand. You'll provide excellent customer service. People will come back to you. So it's important to kind of maybe play that angle. And I get this. We're talking with an owner. The owner might have been doing this for however many years and isn't going to change. But these are ways that we can try.
Okay, very good. That's some great counsel there. Thank you. We're getting close to the end of our time here. I'd maybe like to just end with one final question and then let you, Laura, and your team give any last feedback that you feel would be good for our audience today. So the last question that I have is, can you just give us an up-to-date, there's some basic information on like what's currently happening in the recruiting market? Maybe what are some of those best practices that you see when it comes to hiring? And then we'll let you kind of do a wrap up.
Wonderful. Maren, would you like to take that one?
Absolutely. So, I mean, we know that kind of everything having to do with recruiting has had to just constantly be in flux the last couple of years, right? So we are seeing like more stabilization of what that looks like. However, the way that people are looking at companies to join has changed. So when we are going out and putting out a job ad, we want to make sure that that job ad is really, really specific about the job, but also about the company and the culture that company has and why somebody would actually want to work there. We spend most of our lives at work. We want to make sure that it's a good place to be. So you want to take a careful look at that stuff and make sure that you're advertising your company in a way that is going to attract, those top performers, the type of people that you want working for the company. And then once you have that kind of dialed down, again, thinking about that interview process, how are you like explaining to that potential employee, what it's like to work there? How can you kind of get them on board? And moving them through the interview process quickly is also another thing that people are starting to expect. They don't like being strung along for weeks and weeks and weeks on, okay, well, we have to meet with 15 different people. Like if you can really like pull in your, that process, not only can you get people into work quicker, it's also a good experience. And then again, like Laura said in another question, like, you're going to get those employee referrals, which is another great way to get people. The more you can focus on like what are the great aspects of working here, and really improving that employee culture, and then advertising that employee culture to the best of your ability in job ads is going to get you the type of people that you are looking for. And then if you can bring them on with a good onboarding experience, like we were just talking about, then they're going to be way more willing to stay working there and feel like a part of the team right away.
Great. Thank you, Maren. We just had another question come in, Laura. If it's okay, I'd like to maybe just throw this one at you real quick.
Absolutely.
The question was, our company works with an ADP HR representative.
Mm-hmm.
When I reach out to get guidance and pass the given information to the higher ups, the information given is somewhat pushed to the side, or they keep insisting to go a different route. How do you coach senior level managers, VPs, and owners into following the guidance given when they push back?
So some of the training that we've talked about, I talked about those scenarios, those real life scenarios. If that was something that you wanted to talk about, we've had situations where people didn't follow HR recommendations or didn't even tell us. And it's resulted in, true or not true, claims coming in from employees who have quit or were terminated. So it doesn't really matter. The employee can still work there. Anybody can go to the EEOC, and that can just cost time, money, energy. I mean, you can lose people over things like that. So we recommend going through these scenarios because we have actual dollars assigned to what went wrong, how much time it took, EPLI policies, lawyers going back and forth. And then not only that, the emotional stress. I know the first time that I came across a letter that came to us saying that this person was horribly wronged at work, which I knew was not the case, it was like ruining my day. There was just a lot of kind of stress that went along with that, just because I knew that it wasn't true. But then again, we didn't have any documentation to show that it wasn't. So these things can cost so much money, so much time and money. We'd be more than happy to go through a presentation like that to help with that guidance. And ADP, I'm guessing that this person is with ADP Total Source. Here's another thing that you need to take into consideration when you're with ADP Total Source. If you're with Total Source or any PEO, if you terminate an employee and you didn't follow the processes and you didn't kind of get their blessing to terminate the employee, and they come back and file a wrongful termination, ADP's EPLI will not cover that. That's on you. So the whole point is that they're supposed to help with that protection. But if you don't follow their process and procedure, and believe me, they won't tell you all about it, you could wind up with even more costs on your hand, because you might not have a large EPLI policy. You might only have $10,000 in EPLI insurance. So we want to make sure that folks really understand what this could cost if we don't do it the right way. If we do it the right way, yes, everything has a cost, but it sure doesn't cost the same as if we don't do it the right way.
So, Laura,
I'm sorry, Dan.
go right ahead.
I think part of that too goes back to the relationship that you've built with the management team. So if you have that strong foundation of a relationship, then maybe they won't be as apt to brush to the side any HR recommendations that come, whether they're from you personally or whether they're from ADP Human Resources. I think that could also help maybe make those decisions, the right decisions, quicker, and not having to wait and costing a lot of money.
And I think too, like one of the main benefits that HR can bring to a company is to be able to identify and then mitigate risk when it comes across our plate. So being able to communicate what are the risks, what are the potential outcomes of making the choice that the C-level or owners want to make, so that they're fully aware that pushback could result in A, B, or C, but following this guidance actually can help prevent A, B, and C.
Okay. Very good. So, Laura, if this particular person or others have some more specific questions for you, how can they get in contact with you, and what is your process for helping? I mean, do you have a consultation fee, or do you, how will you go about maybe helping with some of these specific questions?
Absolutely. So because we are running out of time today, and I know these questions are very important to the people who have asked them, and I know that there's a lot more that goes into these questions. So anybody on this call today, they can have my contact information. We can follow up and we can kind of deeper dive into kind of what's going on. So we can help give you a more customized path or solution to move forward. But aside from that, my email, contact us anytime. We do a client intake. We have a whole process that we go through. We typically start with what we call a discovery session, where we kind of go start to finish your total HR processes. So that way we can make recommendations, and then we can make recommendations as to what can be automated, what can be streamlined, what can be leveraged through software to really streamline all those processes for you. So you're not wasting time doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. An offer letter should take you no more than 90 seconds to get out the door. So we can help with that. And we do have just projects that we do for clients. We do have hourly rates if we ever need anything like that. But for anybody on this call today, because I know these questions are very important to you, we didn't get to all of them. And obviously I answer a lot of questions with questions. You may contact me. We'll set something up. We'll get on the phone and we'll talk through these.
So is it okay with you when we send out the follow-up to this, if we just include your email?
Yes, actually, we can include the HR at lnhrconsulting.com. It's monitored by all of us. And that way, whoever's available can pick it up.
Okay, that's HR at lnhrconsulting.com.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Even a human resources firm has human resources.
Very good. Okay. Is there anything you'd like to close us with today? Any other final thoughts that you've had?
Document. That's our little HR rule. Always document. And it not only protects the company, it protects you in that position. Protect yourself. Document.